aspirants amongst them come out to clinch the presidential ticket for the party.
17 of them have been screened, and if you look carefully through that list, you would understand that, frankly speaking, quite a number of them they cut across all ethnic diversity, not northwest, not central. We've seen south, we've seen southeast, and at the point PDP and up till now is yet to come to a consensus arrangement as to which geopolitical zone the presidential ticket should be zoned to. They've still had a back and forth issue with that, and they are yet to come to a concrete decision as to which zone that ticket is going. And you know, to a large extent, having this number of persons, 17 of them, you know, screened to join the primaries, and they've all passed the screening, it means that that is a battle that, of course, would be very interesting to watch out who emerges the winner.
Now, it's going to be a battle for supremacy. It's going to be a battle of who has the best structure within the party.
Absolutely.
It's going to be a battle of who has the best credential, a battle of who is best suitable for the job as far as the candidates are concerned.
Indeed.
And I think this would, to a large extent, help Nigerians, help the electorate get to decide who is best going to lead Nigeria out of the numerous problems that we have presently in the country. And that being said, we're looking forward to the APCs doing their own and other parties in Nigeria, and then Nigerians can begin to place them side by side and see which of the party would we want to jettison for, which of the party would we want to give our hands of support to, and which party or which particular individual we want to support.
Well, to a large extent, we say that the PDP owes the Southeast a lot of loyalty, because truth of the matter is that the Southeasterners have always been very loyal to the People's Democratic Party, unlike the All Progressives Congress. And in the first place, you will see that over time, they have always voted the People's Democratic Party compared to the All Progressives Congress. One of the parties that strives a lot amongst the Southeasterners is APGA. And now, apart from APGA, the next political party is People's Democratic Party. If at this point, if at a nick almost 2 weeks to the primaries, which has already, the date has already been fixed, they are yet to ascertain whether or not they will zone the presidential ticket to the Southeast. It is something that is saddening for the Southeasterners, with so much invested, with so much hope, with so much anticipation. They're still having issues with which geopolitical zone they will want to zone to. But well, I feel the Southeasterners, they're watching, and they feel for equity and justice. They've said it at different forums that they want it, zoned to their geopolitical zone for equity and justice. But let's just see how just the polity will be for the Southeasterners. And I think we'll move away from that at the moment.
Yes, moving away from that, the National Association of Nigerian Students on Sunday declared that no political party will hold a convention to select any presidential candidate in Abuja. NAN's president Sunday Asefon made this known in a statement made available to Newsmain on Sunday. Now, the People's Democratic Party picked the Federal Capital Territory for its May convention to select its presidential candidate amid 15 aspirants from all over the country. And the ruling All Progressive Congress is also reported to have considered Abuja for its presidential primary later this month. Now,
well, if this is anything to go by, if this is a threat that calls for concern, I feel Nigerian government should be worried if NAS would actually try to halt the presidential primaries, because this doesn't spell well. This doesn't spell well. To a large extent, one would say that this spells bloodshed.
Well, as far as the situation is concerned, the present scenario between the ASU and the federal government is concerned. Recall that on several occasions we've said that it is very alarming, it is very terrible, it is heartbreaking to know that such amount of money that is being thrown around within this political period is actually in existence in this country, and we are having one of the most important, one of the most critical sector of the Nigerian system not functioning, talking about education. I mean, in this present situation, in the present century, if we have to compete favorably with other countries of the world, if Nigerian youths have to, stand and compete favorably with their contemporaries across the globe, then education must be given priority. Now, in a situation where education is not given priority, there should be no need for leadership to even come into play. That is the mindset of most Nigerians. And in as much as over time, a lot of persons have said that the Nigerian Student Union have not done enough to drive home its message and tell the federal government there is need to address the issue between the federal government and ASU and the Nigerian student once and for all. If they are able to pull this through, a lot of Nigerian students would to a large extent have something to look back on and say, yes, in 2022, the Nigerian students were able to rise up for the first time and demand justice, and justice was done. And I want to believe that at this point, nobody in leadership position, nobody from the presidency to every aspirant would want the country to be shut down politically, because that will completely disrupt the leadership of the country. That would completely disrupt a lot of things and stay a lot of things out of the line. So it is a right decision taken by the Nigerian students, yes, but then we're looking forward to seeing matching reactions from the government in terms of settling the issue, providing the needed funds for ASU to get back to school, for the students to get back to school, so that we can have a better Nigeria.
Well, frankly, whether or not it is a right decision is subjective, because at this point, I'm concerned about the message that the NAS, National Association of Nigerian Students, is trying to pass across. It's not enough to say that they would stop, or they are attempting to stop the presidential primaries from holding in Abuja. Abuja is not like the only city that presidential decision would hold. And then looking at it, what is their message? There have been this embattled dialogue between federal government and ASU. And now, what is the position of Nigerian student? Nigerian student is yet to take a stand on that particular issue. Now, here is my point. Perhaps they want to join in the struggle for revitalization. What is your demand? Is it just open up the university, I want to get back to school? Or do you agree to a large extent? What are the demands from the line of students? Because they are the direct beneficiaries of this, restructuring that ASU is calling for. Because they actually want the university system to work and function properly to the benefit of Nigerian students and the entire country at large. So what is their position? Are they saying, federal government, we want you between now and 2 weeks to come to get XYZ fixed and reopen school? Or it's just to say, okay, reopen school? What is the exact position? As long as that has not been established, then I'm not sure whether the National Association of Nigerian Students do really have a point, or do really, or their threats is anything to go by. Then again, in as much as that is so, it is very risky to leave it to chance at this point. Federal government would have to also take a stand on that, because I recall the NSAS process when it happened. We would always hear it was hijacked, and at the end people would die. For an event as serious as political party primaries to get presidential candidates elected. Now you want Nigerian students that are also known that with their vibrance and the energy they have, they want to go and stop such a protest that would have security personnel all over, people that are armed with guns and all of them, fully loaded. Now, what do you think would happen? Perhaps they want them to step back and stop the agitation. Would they want to step back? Chances are no. The chances of them stepping back is slim. And now, on the other hand, it might happen that the security agencies might want to use force or apply force to ensure that they step back and allow the peaceful process of the presidential primaries to hold, which of course you can only predict a rift there, and you can never tell how many lives will be lost in the process. So now is the time for federal government not to take that as just a threat, but try to act on it, try to find out the stance of the students and know what they want, address their issue. 1 week is enough to call up the strike. And I think it's not the time to gamble with the lives of Nigerians.
Now, you asked me, does the Nigerian Student Union know what it wants at this point? Are they well articulated enough to demand certain things in specific terms from the federal government? That's the answer that we're yet to see in the public space coming from the student union body. But moving away from that, the fact that they want to go to school, they want to get back to school, that simply means that they are unifying their forces with that of ASU at this point and calling for the different changes from revitalization to UTAS to other issues raised by ASU and other professional bodies within the University Commission. And yes, do the Nigerian youth have the power? Do they have the willpower to put an end or to ensure that the primaries does not hold? Yes, we have seen it happen before, and we are going to see it happen again if necessary steps are not taken. And now don't forget that the Nigerian Labour Congress has also threatened to embark on a nationwide strike if this issue has not been settled. And we've had persons coming out to tell the federal government, go back to the renegotiation table and deal with the issues as it should be. Release what needs to be released to the federal, to the ASU, and let students get back to class. We've had the likes of former Vice President Atiku Abubakar coming out to say that, and lots of other leaders. But then, at this point, some Nigerians are very, very skeptical about believing the statements made by politicians because it can also be a ploy to gain sympathy from the Nigerian people. But then, looking critically at the situation, remember the NSAS protest, like you rightly mentioned, it was hijacked by some criminal element. Yes, Nigerians know. And if you recall vividly, during the shooting that ensued between the army, reportedly, and the people, the harmless protesters, Nigerians shortly after that, youth shortly after that said, if ever, peradventure, there is going to be another protest in Nigeria, it is no longer going to be a peaceful protest as per peaceful protest. It will be a peaceful protest with preparation for whatever will come from the security agencies. And those were statements that made surface on the social media. Those were statements that a lot of persons said, we are not praying for that situation. Because it was first a peaceful protest, and then the reaction came with the ammunitions that came and the lots of people who lost their life. So this time around, if you see Nigerian use of that magnitude on the street, and then you have the security forces, and then there is ammunition, as we know in this country, whether or not you want to believe it or not, that we have guns in the hands of persons who are not security operatives. So if you have to get to that situation where you see the multitude of Nigerian youths take to the street to protest peacefully, and it gets escalated to it gets hijacked, and then in a bid to defend themselves with the security operatives, we are going to see a multitude of bodies count on the ground. So to avoid that,
I think Nigeria shouldn't wait until that point. The federal government of Nigeria shouldn't wait until the situation becomes bloody before they take actions. I think the message has been sent. ASU have tried enough to roll over the first 2 weeks, the first another 4 weeks, another 4 weeks, and on and on. And according to them, they will keep rolling over. I think at the point, to a large extent, the missing link in this particular drama, in this whole federal government ASU issue, it lies to a large extent in the National Association of Nigerian Students. They are the missing link. What do they really want? What is their statement? Youth shouldn't be characterized by just, getting to the streets, carrying placards and protesting. Before you do that, have you written to the federal government? Have you written to the Minister of Education? What is the standpoint of Nigerian students? It is very important for them to take a stand in the issue and tell the government, this is this, this is that. Without that, it is not enough to go on strike. To me, I feel to go on a protest, it's not enough to say, yes, I'm going to halt the presidential primaries. But then you know that a lot of persons will suffer for it if that happened. So yes, Nigerian students should take a stand and try to go through the other peaceful processes before getting on a protest, which might likely be hijacked. But we'll move away from that. And former Vice President Atiku Abubakar on Sunday urged workers across the country to raise in unison by directing their grievances towards voting out bad governance during next year's general elections, both at the federal and state levels. Atiku, in a statement issued on Sunday and shared on his Twitter page in commemoration of the year 2022 International Workers' Day, released that workers to demonstrate the willpower to change their poor working conditions by voting out bad governance during the 2023 elections. And of course, organized labor in Kogi State have told Governor Yahya Bello to urgently address the issue of percentage salaries, and it said local government workers were dying on a daily basis due to percentage payment of salaries and the harsh economic conditions of the country. Then the Nigerian Labour Congress (NLC) and the Trade Union Congress (TUC) disclosed this in Lokoja on Sunday to mark the 2022 Workers' Day celebration. Those are top issues that every average Nigerian understands. Former Vice President Atiku Abubakar was in power as a Vice President for 8 years. He knows the intrigues, he knows the condition of Nigerian workers, but at some points I feel knowing the problem of Nigeria is like a way of using it in your favor to try to get, fans to say, like I said this. It's not enough to know it, it's not enough to say it. How ready are you to change the narrative should be the question at this moment.
Now, the problem Nigerian politicians are going to have right now is the problem of not looking back and saying that a lot has changed compared to 8 years before now. Now, recall that in 2015, all the Nigerians heard and jumped on the bandwagon to support the APC was the change mantra. And that change mantra was not questioned whether or not it's going to be positive change or negative change. That change mantra was not questioned as to how realistic were the promise of change, how attainable were the promise of change, and what time frame where this change is going to be implemented in the overall interest of the Nigerian people. Now, fast forward to this time around, you're looking at walking into 2023 and electing new leaders. Nigerians have seen that when change is promised, change needs a timetable, change needs a time frame, change needs political will to implement. Change is not just about the political aspirant himself. Whether you are the presidential aspirant or you're the governor aspirant, change is not basically about you. Change is not just about your party flagging you off. Change is about your ability to selectively bring people who would connect with you on the willpower and then bring to bear the capabilities, the skills, the ability, and then the strategy that will bring to bear those changes. And now, with all that has unfolded in Nigeria, with all that has happened and all the Nigerians have seen, Nigerians are more wiser, Nigerians are more critical in evaluating situations, Nigerians are not in a hurry to just jump and hold on to a statement made by a politician and then issue their support based on that statement.
Well,
Nigerians are going a lot further, a lot deeper into asking critical questions they would have asked in 2015 when the change mantra was brought into picture.
Vital in that line of conversation is the fact that change is not a single person's narrative. Change is a collective effort, which boils down to why you had the Federal Executive Council meeting, why you have all the ministers delegated with certain responsibilities to target. And now one would wonder, if all or a larger chunk of the ministers in the current Federal Executive Council are vying, including the Vice President of Nigeria, is vying for the office of the presidency, one would wonder, what did they do collectively as an executive? They've been meeting, they've had series of meetings, they've discussed, they know from all what they have said, by their body language, by their statements during consultation, it means they had a fair idea of what should have been done. Now, what would ask, what was missing? What was missing at that point? Former governor of Rivers State, Rotimi Amechi, came up to say he was going to, like almost all his consultation is talking about, putting rail lines and all of this. So you knew that South-South is supposed to have a rail line. You knew that there's supposed to be a rail line cutting across Rivers State to Akwa Ibom State to cross Rivers State, which means we have waterways here that, what was it called? The seaport has been approved, which means we will need those rail lines to be there in check, so that when the seaport is completed, we would have easy flow, easy ways to move vessels from one state to another. And yet that was not done. Why wasn't it done? People should be able to ask him, why was it not done? And now the vice president came with his own campaign slogan. He's talking about, okay, we're going to invest more in this, invest more in that. Why wasn't it invested? Why wasn't it done? Why wasn't it suggested during the Federal Executive Council meeting? And now we've seen other persons from the same cabinet. Chris Ngige is here. He's speaking about this and that. And now, to a large extent, why wasn't that idea implemented? You are a part of this government. They are all part of this government. Why are we looking, why all of them coming out and seeking for the president? Does it mean if you're not the president in Nigeria, no change can be effected? Okay, if you have a wonderful idea and the second person has a wonderful idea and the third person has a wonderful idea, we will need all three to become president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria before we have three ideas implemented. Where comes unity? Where comes the Executive Council meeting? Why do we have them in the first place? Are they just there like figureheads to eat money and then at the end of the day vie for the office of the president? These are questions, these are issues that individuals should begin to ask as they are going about their consultations. People should ask them, if you have this wonderful idea, yes, it's wonderful, it's awesome, why didn't you introduce it? You're part of this administration. It should have been implemented before now. Why are you waiting? Okay, perhaps you don't have the opportunity to become the president. What happens to such ideas?
Now, I will answer that question from the viewpoints of Nigerians who will draw your attention back to the statement that the Minister of Transportation, Amaechi, made after the Abuja-Kaduna train incident, where he said, and I quote, that the reason... It
could have been avoided, right?
Yes, that the
now,
issue could
what
have been avoided.
What was the second issue? The second issue was that, okay, you were asked to bring specifications, that this company did not meet the standard company to be awarded such contract. And now what happened? Was that the only company in the whole wide world? Would you say that was the only company that was supposed to handle that project?
Before the federal government came out with that, the first thing that surfaced was Amaechi's statement that he would have gotten the deal done had the contract been approved, but that some of the ministers, some of his colleagues stole the project or the process and did not allow that to come to be before the other league memo that came to say, oh, the Federal Executive Council could not approve his proposal based on XYZ. Now, why did I have to reference that situation? It is one thing to have a sitting president. It is one thing to have a leader who has the mindset. It is one thing to know that all of the persons vying for the office of the President of the Federal Republic have been within this present administration occupying top critical positions that gave them the right and opportunity to not just air their minds, to not just contribute their ideas, but also contribute to the implementation of those ideas. But what then happened? Now, placing national interest and personal interest is what happened. It therefore means that within the time that I've been within this administration, since they were not the man at the end of affairs, a lot of persons will argue because they are not the one directly at the end of affairs, they tend to not bother about the general interest.
Does that
but
mean the ministers in this administration were working against the vision of President Muhammadu Buhari? Could that be said to be the reason?
Well, a lot of persons would argue on that grounds because judging from the scenario now, every single one of them is promising change. Every single one of them is promising transformation. And all of a sudden, every person seems to understand the exact problem of Nigeria and seem to understand how to go about solving it.
Which calls for concern, which means they have had this idea, they know the problems of Nigeria, they know the solution to the problems in Nigeria, but yet we don't seem to have the solution.
That is exactly the point. And that is why I have stated categorically that most Nigerians at this point have grown wiser. And that is why you would see a greater portion of Nigerians are not clamoring for a recycled, a group of recycled politicians who have consistently been in the system, who seem to always know the problem when it's coming to election period, but once they get back into the office, seem to lack clue as to how to go about handling those problems and settling the issues for the overall interest of the Nigerian people.
Well,
but then
let's go on a short break. Let's go on a break, and when we return, the program continues. Please stay with us. Welcome back. This is your Political Spectrum, reaching us live from the beautiful hills of Ibiakura. And of course, we've just wrapped up with the updates on political issues across the country, and we would just have to narrow it down to, the main issue of discuss today, which happens to be one of the very, very burning issue in town right now.
And yes, when you talk about burning issues, we just have to get right into understanding that at this point in time where we are in politics, if we do not get it right, if we do not air our views, if we do not speak our minds and give our opinions, then those things will not get to be implemented.
Okay, well, as we speak, we know that on 30th April, which was on Saturday, there was an ad hoc delegate election conducted across the state in all wards across the 21 local government area in Akwa Ibom State, and of course that saw through the emergence of 3 delegates per ward in Akwa Ibom State, and of course to a large extent that was supposed to be the ad hoc, to form the list of the ad hoc delegates which will be voting in the PDP, upcoming PDP primaries election that is scheduled for this month. And on that basis, there have been series of back and forth, some saying they didn't get materials on time, some said, well, material got there, and plus the press release by the People's Democratic Party has it that the elections went smoothly, and that informs our burning story for this morning. Talking about burning stories, yes, still on the delegate elections, a lot of persons have complained that yes, materials didn't get to them on time, and others have said that the list was hijacked by a certain set of people in the People's Democratic Party. But you will recall that before now there was a memo that was sent, and candidates or aspirants were assured that there will be a level playing ground, and to a large extent the delegate election has really shown what the level playing ground would look like in 2023.
Well, one thing I love about politics, even when there is hijacking of processes within the political system, there is always a way out for persons who have over time understood. Because if you're a politician, over time you understand how the party politics go, you understand the structure, you understand the gimmicks that would come at the end of the party system, that you must have prepared yourself ahead. Now, that is one of the reasons that say that you cannot have stable loyalists within the party, and there's no permanent friend, there's no permanent enemy. I think it comes from that basis, because whether or not we know whether or not politicians agree to it, there are persons who are open loyalists, and there are persons who are secret loyalists. Now, when you conduct a primary or you conduct a selection process based on who you think by open declaration or open manifestation are loyal to certain group of persons, you do not have any idea who amongst those persons who are openly loyal to a particular person are equally more loyal in secret to other persons still within the same political party system. So that is why, in as much as we know, or this hijacking process or accusations and counter accusations will always surface throughout the electioneering period, throughout the different political processes, truth also remains that at the nick of time, on the grounds of the elections, you would see miracles happen. You would see persons who had expected that it was all about their loyalists, it was all their loyalists whom they have selected in camp, still wake up to see defeat. Yeah,
there's always that last minute surprise, but let's take a look at this video now.
Party register. We get a material. This is almost to 4 o'clock. We get a material. Leader of the war, honorable right on the party for I go to the Rando. As I have been not to get your career horror. Yes, I we get a material as I make it. Yes, I a good young guy can register. I will among Ponte. We get a material and take it. I did a good young. There is no material in our war trail. I'm shouting for everybody to hear. There is no material in what our Ward 3. We are not doing any half-of election in our Ward 3. We have not seen any material. The only thing that is going on now, that right honorable party funding was to call the name in the register, and that is the end of it. We have not seen material up to 4 o'clock now. Reporting from our Ward 3.
Well, that's why we're here. We've been here since morning just like it. Because we expected the right thing to be done. Everybody will come here, the official will address us, and then the material, but none of that has happened.
Okay, so you smell it from?
Well, I'm smelling what you're also smelling, because if gone there, you have not seen anybody. It therefore shows there's something going on.
What they are doing is
I beg your pardon?
I'm saying that at the end of the day, you have the confidence that the party is
that is our expectation. But from the way it is, I just hope that they can correct it and get it properly done. No, thank you.
Yes, good afternoon. Well, we just came to normally based on the guidelines. You understand the panel arrived. They also were invited to the state party office to be the panel headed by.
The party register. We don't material. This is almost to 4 o'clock. We get a material. Leader of the war, honorable right honorable party reform. I go to the Rando. As I have been not to get your career horror. Yes, I we get a material. As I make it. Yes, I a Kuranga, the register. I will among Pontic. We get a material in take it. I did we are Pontic. There is no material in our Ward 3. I'm shouting for everybody to hear. There is no material in what our Ward 3. We are not doing any half-of election in our Ward 3. We have not seen any material. The only thing that is going on now, that right honorable party funding was to call the name in the register, and that is the end of it. We have not seen material up to 4 o'clock now. Reporting from our Ward 3.
Well, that is a very serious issue there. Well, there is a press statement by the PDP Publicity Secretary that as part of the build-up to party primaries for 2023 polls, the People's Democratic Party in Akwa Ibom State had conducted its World Congress across the state to elect ad hoc delegates who will vote at the party's primaries election. And of course, he says Governor Dom Emmanuel, who took part in the exercise in his hometown, Ward 1, peacefully and orderly conducted conduct of the Congress and disposition of the PDP in Akwa Ibom State. Well, that is our Ward 1. And we just saw a video in our Ward 3 that up until 4 p.m. at that day, and perhaps till the end of the day, no material arrived to the ward. And of course, you could see from the frustration of people that what basically happened was that attendance was taken, and by the attendance being taken, anybody can be ticked as being someone who must have participated in the elections or not. Yes, we also saw top aspirants, governorship aspirants there. We saw the likes of Obong Basi Albert. We saw the likes of Mr. Akanokonde, who actually still confirmed to the issue that nothing was done. They were called to come to the party headquarters, and they got there, and it appears that the process was hijacked by a higher authority or some sort. But well, those are critical issues that calls for concern at this moment.
Now, we were, a lot of persons in the society were expecting a lot of things are going to happen within this electioneering period. Recall that one of the things, the first news that broke out from Port Harcourt was the fact that one of the gubernatorial aspirant, Obong Albert, was not screened, and eventually we saw comments from his media aides surfacing again that to the glory of God, he is successfully being screened. Now that first and foremost sent a signal that lots of persons were not possibly trying to, you know, mar his being screened and standing for elections during the primaries. Now coming down here, we've said Awa is in Ona local government, and that is where the Governor Domi Manuel is from. And so if we have the word of the governor actually taking the process, and we've had pictures, we've had images surfacing from there, and then we've also had videos surfacing from another part of Awa with that process not being done. And it's not just limited to Awa. We've had comments from different sections of Akwa Ibom State saying election materials for the selection process within the People's Democratic Party didn't actually get to, and then for some who actually got there, it was somehow manipulated, not to the interest of the people of the party, but, you know, carted away or ruled over by some selected group of persons. Now, bring that to the situation at hand. We're talking about maintaining peace. We're talking about, you know, ensuring that posterity stands. We're talking about ensuring that there is no breakdown of law and order come 2023 or as we approach the 2023 election. And then we've had the chairman of the People's Democratic Party in Akwa Ibom State during the consultation processes assured all of the aspirants within the political party that there will be a level playing ground. Now, if you had accepted to give everybody a level playing ground, which is the right thing to be done, and yet from the selection process of the candidates or the delegates who are going to form the overall list of those who are going to form or vote these persons and then decide who goes with the party's flag, there is already a problem. That problem is going to trail from this period till you get to election period. And we might be seeing a repeat of crisis that ensued between former gubernatorial aspirant Senator Udodege and during the administration of Godswill Akpabio, where different properties were burnt and destroyed, vehicles that were meant, I think as at then, that was when the Akwa Ibom taxi scheme was about to be released. And we had hundreds, if not thousands, of vehicles burnt at the state secretariat. And that is something that no Akwa Ibomite would want to see a repeat playing out. And so it is very critical that the key stakeholders, the key politicians within the PDP quickly rise to the scenario and solve the situation. Because if the top aspirants who are vying for that same position are already making statement that the election process for selecting the ad hoc staff was not credible, was not fair, and even didn't happen, they already have evidence. So court is the next point of view. If we have to avoid those scenarios from playing out, then we have to be very careful. Otherwise, maintain peace movement might end up becoming maintain war movement.
Oh, well, like I would like to say in my line of argument that it is not always ideal to have your back hit to the world and to have a bounce back before issues begin to be addressed on the table. Well, at this point, there was a memo by the People's Democratic Party, the National Secretary, which actually was signed on the April 29 prior to the ad hoc elections on the 30th of April. And the PDP NWC issued a zero tolerance to imposition and infringement. And of course, the National Working Committee, NWC, of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, advises all political leaders, stakeholders, and officials of the to conduct themselves in line with the party's regulations in the three-man ad hoc and National Delegate Congress and primary slated for Saturday, April 30th, 2022. And the directives in part of the resolution of the NWC at his 552nd meeting on Wednesday, April 27, 2022, in keeping with the resolve to ensure credible, transparent, free, and fair process in the build-up to the 2023 general elections, the NWC advises party leaders, stakeholders, and members at all levels to refrain from any form of imposition, infringement, and meddlesomeness in the exercise, adding that any evidence of infringement and non-compliance with the provisions of the Election Act and the party's electoral guidelines will attract serious consequences, including cancellation of the outcome of such ad hoc delegate elections. And of course, this is coming directly all members and officials of the party to respect and fully comply with the party's constitution and the electoral guidelines in the conduct of the 3-man ad hoc and national delegate congress and primaries. Well, that is the position of the National Working Committee led by the chairman Iyochia Ayu, and of course the statement was given prior to the election, which of course should have been the basis for the conduct, which should have guided the process of the conduct of the ad hoc election, and to a large extent going by what we have seen, in as much as the People's Democratic Party Akwa Ibom State chapter has come out with a press release that yes, the elections held, yes, it held peacefully. We even saw when the governor actually voted in our Ward 1, which is actually his word. But then again, in other places, still in the same Una local government and some other wards across the state, we saw that issues of just marking registers, and then the entire process was hijacked. And there are also another information in another public space angle which says that the names for the ad hoc was already pre-planned, pre-written, that what we saw, what happened on the 30th of April was just a mere formality. Even at that, it was not still, let loose for the participation of all party faithfuls.
Well, in a situation where we are already having issues, like I said earlier, the PDP had already issued a statement that in a situation where there are proofs and evidences that there were infringements of rights, there were, things were not done properly, the process was not fair, was not credible, there was nothing to write home about or to stand by, then such processes was going to be cancelled. And so you already have top aspirants within the party system telling you straight up, this does not happen. And if it did not happen, there is evidence to show it did not happen. This is like one of the numerous videos that we already have on the social media. And then talking about the issue of consensus, the party also had exercised a stance that it does not want that to be played out so far within the process of selecting the ad hoc staff. So when that statement has been made, and yet some persons still feel because they're stakeholders, because they have the upper hand, possibly they still have the right or can go ahead and do what they feel, then we're going to have a serious crisis. Now, within the PDP, we have several aspirants who are standing, several aspirants who have been cleared. If you are indeed fair with the Akwa Ibom people as a party, what PDP owes Akwa Ibom people at this point should have been to let the delegate selection list be free, be fair, and without prejudices. Now, with those delegate lists, you would have been able to now ascertain that the build-up to the process was credible, then the process itself would be credible. And that way, should any of these aspirants lose out, they will know that they lost out based on the choices of the people, and not because someone somewhere or some group of persons somewhere choose to deliberately frustrate their effort and disenfranchise them.
Well, talking about evidence, you would say, I think every person would hold evidence or whether or for his or his line of thought. Because frankly, in as much as there is evidence like what we saw there, that elections never held in our Ward 3, in our Ward 1 where the governor voted, you could see the orderliness there. You could see people standing on a straight line. You could see that there was an election. And you could see the number of persons that took part in that particular election. This goes a long way to prove and can serve as an evidence in the court of law that yes, elections held, yes, it was in a peaceful, orderly manner like we have seen in that picture. And this is someone announcing the election result and the 3 ad hoc delegates that emerged from that elections. And of course, another person would come with it. It boils down on the courts to find out what really happened. And trust me, it's going to be a very difficult legal battle there.
Well, the legal battles are oftentimes not easy to handle, but then, like you said, I mean, this is the governor's ward, and you would not expect anything less other than orderliness, because that is where most of the attention of the media is going to be focused on. But what a lot of persons within the political system oftentimes refuse, or possibly out of negligence or for whatever reason do not pay attention to, is the other aspect that does not have to do with key players like the figure of the governor. So if within the same location, the same wards surrounding the governor's ward, you've had reports that while it was successful where the governor's ward is. It was not successful in this other ward because the governor is not there. That is to show you that if it could happen within the surroundings of the governor's ward himself, that it has happened even far worse in other locations across the different local government areas of the state. And so with that, you can say that a lot of persons would have significant evidence that election or the processes was not actually credible and fair to a large extent. And then you'll also have some group of persons saying, yes, it did actually hold. It happened within the ward of the governor. It happened within the ward of some, other political leaders. But then between those whose evidence would stand for the fact that the process was credible, it was fair, it was peaceful, and those who would have evidence to prove that the process was not credible, it was not fair, it didn't even happen at all. Which of these two is going to win at the end of the day? Now, that is the question. That is the issue that the courts will have to decide.
You know that as far as the Nigerian law is concerned, it's blind and it doesn't take sides with anybody. It depends on how well one is able to prove his or her case. And quite frankly, a lot is still going on. Now, we have this post that was made by the immediate past local government chairman of your local government area in the person of Elder Imoko, and he said manipulations of the PDP primaries elections that are not in line with Electoral Acts 2022, PDP Constitution, and as amended in 2017 and 2022. PDP election guidelines amount to nothing but failure in initio. And of course, for those in your local government area running with INEC officials and surrogates of government officials, you are wasting your time. I know most of you have not read the relevant sections of the above law and extant laws, and the leadership of the party at the national is very much aware of the consequences of an improper ward congress elections that should produce the 3 ad hoc delegates, and legally it is the foundation of all subsequent elections. And as such, the saying goes that you cannot put something on nothing and expect it to stand. So shall it be. Then the outcome of any elections to be conducted is a flawed process procedures, the ad hoc delegates. And of course, it is pertinent to advise INEC to remain the neutral monitor as the law provides. Let me remind all that no one man or group of persons can choose how to circumvent the law and others become speculators. The state PDP, through the publicity secretary, issued a release yesterday, 29th April 2022, regarding today's World Congress, that it will start by 10 a.m. but in your local government by 8 a.m. Some people, in their usual desperate state, went about deceiving the public and themselves of conducting Congress's elections without all the aspirants who had legitimately purchase and express their interest to become the ad hoc delegate. Those persons across the 11 wards of the your local government areas have inalienably rights from the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria and PDP to vote and be voted for. So any scam in the name of World Congress that excluded about 50 legitimate aspirants is null and void. The state PDP should be properly guided that no aspirant who duly purchased the ad hoc delegates nomination form should be stopped from contesting at World Congress. There is no provision for screening of ad hoc delegate aspirants, talk less of disqualifying anyone. They are all members of the party. For the steward arrangement in your local government area, I don't want to believe that the oath-taking exercise of Monday, 25th April 2022 was the disqualification to contest ad hoc delegate elections today, as seen from the various ward contests. It is sad and laughable that some of the leaders will descend such level of giving people's wives, husbands, and children mbiam just to succeed political interests, but their wives, children, and relatives are not part of it. What an irony of life. Ad hoc delegate aspirants, you are free to seek redress through all the measures provided by the party. I hereby call on all right-thinking people of your local government area to remain calm, but resist these illegalities with wisdom. Well, that is a long one there coming from Honorable Imokun and former Uyo local government chairman. He has stated categorically that there is no disqualification for aspirants vying to be ad hoc, but we saw that what came out was that a lot of persons were disqualified even before the elections.
Now, Honorable Imokun, by his disposition, has always been a very careful and thoughtful politician. He's always been very straightforward in his thought pattern, has always been very vocal in making the public and within his jurisdiction to know his standpoint. And I love the fact that over time he's been consistent with always wanting the best way out of a situation, the best way that is within the confines of the law, the best way that is within the provisions of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the best way that is within the guiding principles and laws of the political party system. I'm talking about the PDP. And yes, like I said before we even get to read his comment, now, the party has already said a faulty process cannot create a standing leadership. So where the process is faulty, there are two options left. Is either every other process that will be built on that faulty foundation will be disqualified, and that is something the PDP wouldn't want to happen at this particular time. Now, the other thing that would have to happen quickly if the party rises to the occasion will be to handle the situation that has ensued so far. Now, we've seen from Awa, in our local government area, we're seeing in Uyo, and this is just like 2 out of the many that is already in the public space. Now, the political party says 10 a.m. is the time for the process. And some persons organize the process at 8, others as at 4, there was no process, there were no materials on ground, others actually carried out. Now, the evidence already gathered, the processes that are going to happen, the legal battles, all of this fight could have been prevented if some persons did not think themselves above the laws of the party, above the the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, above the provisions within the 2022 Electoral Act. To handle this situation now, it is very important that we do not blow things out of proportion. And I love the fact that the former chairman has said that those who are aggrieved with the evidence available should seek redress through all the available legal means. And with these available legal means, then we are going to have a situation at hand. And I just hope that the political party rises to the occasion and solve this issue before it gets out of hand.
Well, interestingly, that should be the case, and resolving the issue, I say it will be extremely difficult at this time because, frankly speaking, to a large extent, some parties would say the ad hoc elections held coming from the angle of the PDP publicity secretary, who is supposed to be here on this program, but for some reasons had in few minutes ago called off in the interview due to some state reasons, state functions that his attention has been drawn to. But then again, we would be back on this conversation, but that will be after this time out. Do stay with us. Welcome back. The show is still Political Spectrum, reaching us live from the beautiful hills of Ibiakuren. And interestingly, we are live on our different social media platforms on Facebook and also on YouTube. So do well to use the handle SpectrumTVNg and let's connect and get talking. Perhaps you were one of those who were supposed to be there at the ad hoc elections, or maybe you were one of the voters who were supposed to cast your vote. How did it happen at your polling unit? How did it happen in your ward? And how do you see the process? Do you think it was fair enough, or do you think it was hijacked? And these are issues that we would want to relate with you on. So let's get talking on the socials. And of course, away from that, Francis, you would agree that to a large extent, when we talk about delegates, these are supposed to be representatives of the people. These are supposed to be people who have, thrown themselves into the to join the race and buy forms, and then they want to stand for the elections. As far as elections are concerned, in a democratic process, everyone is supposed to have a fair chance, to have, there's this freedom to be voted and to vote and to be voted for. So once that freedom is infringed on, and as far as we know, according to the law and according to the electoral guidelines, for ad hoc elections, there's supposed to be no disqualification. And from what Honorable Imokun actually said, he said that in your local government area, about more than 50 persons bought the forms to join the race, but did not actually get to join the race because there was some sort of screening and people were dropped out of it. And this is a process that is questionable.
It is definitely a process that is questionable. It's a process that is capable of bringing problems. It's a process that is capable of generating a lot of violent situation if not properly handled. And like I said, I love the fact that the former chairman has come out to address the people as a leader and urge them not to take any other measures except those provided within the confines of the constitution of the party, the guiding principle of the party, and the constitution of the Nigerian state. Now, we as a people, we have been used to these situations where we have some persons whom a lot of persons would call power brokers within the party system sit and decide who the one to represent the person or represent the will of the people. And after sitting to decide, they pick these names and then impose it on the people. This, as we know, is against the practice of democracy, which should be the people actually selecting the different persons who have put themselves out there to tell the people, look, we want to be your voices, we want to represent you, we want to carry your problems to the party system and get to elect someone we know is going to bring to bear all the answers that we need as a community. Now, one of the reasons a lot of political analysts would say we have consistency in issues within the local environment is because these persons who possibly should have represented their persons and give voice to the different issues within their community are not the ones who at the end of the day end up representing their people. Now, from that process alone, you are not just disenfranchising the delegates or the persons who have indicated interest to be selected as ad hoc members, you are disenfranchising the entirety of the community who by virtue of the hijack cannot say their mind, cannot express where they stand, and cannot choose a candidate they would want to represent them in election. When those situations are faulted, the entirety of the process, like the PDP statement release has already stated, is faulty. And when the entirety of the selection process is faulty, then you cannot say that whoever emerges as the flag bearer was credibly selected or was the will of the masses of the party who actually emerged. And then we are going to go back to the same old story of court cases, appeals and counter appeals, and sometimes we might even skyrocket out of proportion into the crisis of violence that we have seen. So how do we now remedy the situation? I really had hoped that the PDP publicity secretary will be here, and personally I would say we will still have to go on his tail until he gets to answer, because a lot of Akwa Ibomites would want to know, why did your party issue a statement that the selection process will commence at 10 and then some locations commence the process at 8 o'clock? Are you telling us that since you've come out to say that it was successfully done, that you did not include the processes in those locations who did not adhere to the rules of the game? Or are you telling us that you were doing selective appraisal of the different locations, so you pick the ones that are favorable to you and then you leave the ones that are not favorable? Then if that is the case, these are all questions that Akwa Ibomites would want to hear at this point. These are the questions that the people within the PDP also want to hear before we even get to the process of having court cases or legal battles.
Exactly, because frankly speaking, a lot of persons are concerned, and talking about crisis emanating from this, you would know that the likes of the governorship aspirant, Obongbasi Albert, he has tons of supporters, he has a lot of persons backing him up, he has some die-hard supporters who won't stop at nothing but protect the interests of their principal. And now to the same extent, you see the likes of Akanokun, he's a billionaire, he's doing very well in business, and he also has, don't take no doubt, a lot of persons who say, okay, it's just coming into politics. Make no mistake, he has tons of supporters, he has a lot of people backing him up. And look at the likes of Akanokun, former commissioner for finance. He also has tons of supporters. He has groups backing him up, and they also have die-hard fans who would stop at nothing to protect the interests of their principal. Now, with that being said, with all these interests, which seemingly is being about to be trashed or about to be hijacked and all of that, you will see reactions from the supporters. Basically, it's not always the frontliners. You won't see Obongbasi Albert maybe display some form of attitude that might not be worthy, but you still see him being courteous and exchanging pleasantries. But there is someone behind him who might just pick offense and say, what? Perhaps he is someone that has been sponsored by the senator. Perhaps he's someone that the senator has empowered in terms of a job or maybe a skilled acquisition and setup and all of that. So such persons are die-hard fans that would stop at nothing to protect the interests of their principal. At this time, I feel PDP should be extremely careful. I feel PDP should be able to put their house in order, because it is very critical a time. You never can tell what is coming up. I know we've always had this saying that PDP is a religion in Akwa Ibom State, but perhaps we are yet to see another narrative to that story. Just how religious is the People's Democratic Party amidst all this? Perhaps they go through with these processes because already as we speak, the ad hoc winners have been declared in the ad hoc election that held on April 30th. And as far as the People's Democratic Party Akwa Ibom State chapter is concerned, the elections held and ad hoc delegates were elected. And that will inform the ad hoc delegates that will vote at the primaries. Apart from the statutory delegates who, of course, a lot of persons feel, are not aligning to the interests of the government, and which means the government at some point is allergic. A lot of persons feel the government wants to maybe take control of the ad hoc delegate to supersede the statutory delegates who are not aligning to the interests of the government. Perhaps that would be a battle of delegates. How many are the statutory delegates compared to the ad hoc delegates, and who controls each of this structure? If PDP begins to fight with itself, chances are that, like the saying in Ibibio land, can you for like neighbor will come and set fire, and APC is building up to take over power. How can you tell that APC will not, overtake the People's Democratic Party in 2023 election? It's so much to be anticipated at the moment.
Now, a lot of times, political parties make the mistake to think that just because they have been in power for a long period of time, that they can remain undefeated. Remember, that's what happened with the PDP. Regardless whether or not it was actually President Goodluck Jonathan who took that decision, he took it not just for himself but also for the party.
Absolutely.
So any political party who thinks they or believe themselves unopposed and would always remain unopposed within a particular state, they're doing themselves more harm than good. And then talking about the phrase or the cliche that PDP is a religion. Idea, religion is subjective. Religion is at this point in time infrastructure based, or what persons call stomach infrastructure based. And in as much as a lot of persons are preaching past the stomach infrastructure politics, you would also know that over time, the issue of interest, the issue of persons who have contributed to the advancement of the party, the issue of persons who have paid their dues is very critical. And like we know, it is oftentimes not the political aspirants who incite the violence. It is their supporters. It is their followers. And these followers most times do not pay attention to their principal at the top. We've had instances where the principal will say, I want peace. But the supporters are saying, we do not want peace that will bring us into such XYZ situation. Because they know, in as much as you are their principal, in as much as they have confidence that you would deliver what the people want, if peradventure you vow for peace, or you sue for peace, or you agree on a peace talk, and then that is settled, the majority of persons who are going to suffer, who are going to bear the brunt of the poor leadership that is going to come into the picture, is going to be them, not you, the principal. And that is why a lot of persons who actually who go about the violent action don't oftentimes listen to their principal. So how do we remedy that situation now? This is the time for PDP to say, okay, we have had reports already coming up. And I love the fact that the National Executive Council of the PDP have said, until those things are proven that it was actually credible, then it cannot be accepted. And we are here to see a statement from the National Secretary of the People's Democratic Party verifying that Akwa Ibom State actually held the primary election, and that those ad hoc members selected were done based in line with the guidelines of the party, in line with the Electoral Act, in line with the Constitution and provisions of the law of the Nigerian state. Now, until that is done, we cannot say whether or not we've had, I mean, the publicity the publicity secretary in Akwa Ibom State has issued a statement. Yes, that is his job as the PDP publicity secretary in Akwa Ibom State. But whether or not that statement will be verified at the national level is what we have to watch out for. And when that is done, then that is when we're going to see the reactions that's going to come. But at this point,
if we see top contenders like Obong Basi Albert, like Akano Khan, like Mr. Kanudofia, like many other top candidates, aspirants that were there, stranded at the party's state secretariat, how would basically a few handful of the aspirants who were not there say election held when the majority of the aspirants say elections did not hold? How do you marry those two, extreme cases? This one says it's held. A few hands said it's held. Majority said it did not hold. Now, PDP, like I said before now, would have to be extremely careful, because perhaps they would manage to prove that the elections held, and in the long run, because this case, as far as court cases are concerned in Nigeria, it would keep moving from one court to another. Perhaps they want to get to appeal, maybe to get to the High Court first, then the Appeal Court, and then it will finally land at the Supreme Court. Let's say they've managed to prove within the High Court and the Appeal Court that yes, the ad hoc primaries held, and based on that, the outcome of that election, the ad hoc delegates that emanated from the outcome of that elections were used as delegates in the PDP primaries to bring out a flag bearer for the People's Democratic Party. And perhaps that also leads to the winning of that particular candidate as the next governor of Akwa Ibom State come 2023. And if they manage to prove at the higher courts, perhaps the court's case lasts for up to a year, and they managed to prove in the Supreme Court that the ad hoc elections that held on 30th April 2022 was faulty, and that a lot of persons, did not vote, and maybe there were some infringements, like it's stipulated by the press release by the National Working Committee, you would see that it automatically disqualifies the winner of such elections. So at that point, the People's Democratic Party would have to be careful so that they don't go ahead against the flow. Perhaps if they go against the flow, it will all crumble down at the end of the day. So these are issues that they should be very mindful of at this initial time so they don't get it wrong.
Well, there is no rocket science involved in it. There are no two ways to say the obvious truth, and that is this: if you get the wrong foundation, if you get the foundation wrong, then whatever is going to be put on top of that foundation is wrong. And when those two things are wrong, then it nullifies every other thing that has been done. The People's Democratic Party in Akwa Ibom State has been a long-standing party. Yes, we agree. We know that politics, one way or the other, would always tilt to favor one person to the detriment of others. Yes, but at this point in time, what Akwa Ibomites are asking for is credible and fair process. Let us know that whoever emerges as the leader of the Akwa Ibom people, whether from the APC or from the PDP or any other party within the state, actually emerge as the will of the people, not the will of a collected few, either within the party system or within the state power broker structure. Whichever way, the PDP at this point should know that, in as much as we've had scenarios where the PDP is laughing currently at the situation where the APC, have factions and there's internal rancor and fights within the APC. This might just be one that would bring what is far worse than what is being experienced within the APC to the PDP. And considering the level of personalities that are involved, I mean, you're talking about, like you rightly mentioned, the likes of Basi Albert, you mentioned the likes of Onofioglu, the likes of Ideo Wodion, who has thousands or hundreds of thousands of supporters, the likes of Akanodofia. All of those persons are persons who have the means, who have the loyalty, who have persons who are loyal to them, who have persons who are willing oftentimes to stake their lives to have their rights, their rights come to be. So if we want to prevent the post-election violence, if we want to prevent a situation where after a candidate eventually emerges as the governor, instead of spending the first 2-3 years to look at the issues of the Akwa Ibom people and how to address it, he will be spending same in the court trying to prove whether or not he actually was the flag bearer of the People's Democratic Party or the APC, regardless of whichever party comes into power, or he was not. Now, that is already going to drain the person. That is already going to redirect the focus of the Nigerian, whoever emerges as the leader, and that would mean the Akwa Ibom people would suffer, and nobody will want to see that.
Well, suffering is what Akwa Ibomites wants to minimize. Suffering is what the entire Nigerians wants to, completely trash out come 2023, because I feel Nigerians and Akwa Ibomite, they've suffered enough. We've had enough of bad leadership. We've had enough of leadership issues in the country, and we feel, or Nigerians feel, change should begin now, and change should begin come 2023 to chart a new course for leadership and for, of course, maybe prosperity and job creation and all of that. So yes, this is where we would want to call it a day on Political Spectrum, but sadly we couldn't have our guests. The appointment got truncated few minutes into the beginning of the interview, and sadly we'll assure you that that conversation is far from being ended, because there are questions begging for answers, which of course we believe that the PDP Publicity Secretary would do justice to that when he is less busy. Of course, this is where we call it a wrap on Political Spectrum. Thank you very much for watching. I have been Otto Basitan.
And I am Frank Cizadet. Do have a lovely day.